On the morning of August 24th, 79 AD, the people of Pompeii woke up thinking that it was just another day in this playground of Rome's elite. But by 10 a.m., a slight ash started to cover everything. By 2 in the afternoon, the ash turned coarser, driving people indoors. Others started fleeing the city, but it was too late. By 7:30 the next morning, the volcano sent a gas cloud 20 miles into the air. Boulders of fire then rolled down the side of the mountain, incinerating everything in their path. The bodies of the inhabitants were trapped in cocoons of hot ash, creating these casts that would immortalize the dead. As it turns out, the eruption may have been the catalyst for the spread of Christianity in the Roman Empire. Prior to the eruption, there were early Christians in Rome and Pompeii. Most of them got here after 66 AD, when the Jews of Judea rose in revolution. After 4 years of fighting, the Romans captured Jerusalem and its temple, Judaism's holiest site. The Roman general Titus torched the temple and turned hundreds of thousands of Jews into slaves. Among them were the earliest Christians, from places like Jerusalem, Bethlehem, and Nazareth. Jesus had predicted the destruction of the temple. Now that it had happened, Jews generally, and Jesus followers in particular, were waiting for the Romans to be punished for their deeds. In the meantime, they would have been sent to places like Pompeii, serving as slaves in opulent Roman villas such as this one. They were disgusted by what they saw, a culture where power and violence were the currency of the day and sex was a religion. The Romans may not have been thinking about divine punishment, but the slaves were.
There's very clear evidence in the Acts and in other documents that Christianity was a religion that had a major appeal in the slave community.
The archaeological evidence is preserved on fast disappearing graffiti discovered on Pompeii's walls. I come here with Professor Rebecca Benefel of Washington and Lee University to investigate ancient graffiti on the wall of a building known as the Hotel of the Christians.
This is called the Hotel of the Christians because very early on in 1862, there was discovered a very enigmatic graffito. But there's this one word that has fascinated everyone, Christianos.
This charcoal graffiti had been preserved under ash for 1,800 years.
Then it would be the earliest archaeological attestation to the word Christian anywhere.
Christianos, yeah.
Another significant graffiti, scratched on wall plaster, was published in 1921. Attached to the published photograph were directions to a specific Pompeii address, House 14.
Should be here.
You see how the plaster is gone.
Yeah. But luckily, we have a really good photo. We have two words, one in Greek, one seemingly in Latin, and then two stars. What do you make of this?
Well, start with the middle word. So that's an attempt in Latin letters to represent the word kerem, which is one of the most chilling words in the Hebrew language. That's the word used in the Bible when God utterly blots out a place. Sodom and Gomorrah were made kerem. And then you've got the poinium, which is not a Latin word, but it's a Latinized word. I think it has to be from the Greek poine, which means to smite. So smite, utterly destroy, and then the two stars. They're five-pointed, they're the Solomon stars. We see them on magic bowls. What it shows us is that people in this culture, particularly Jews and Christians, were warning their friends and neighbors and saying, just wait. You think you're in the lap of luxury, you think everything's fine, everything's peaceful, just wait, because God has something to say.
Did pagan Romans interpret the destruction of Pompeii as the wrath of the God of the Bible for the destruction of Jerusalem? Did the eruption make Christians out of them? Strikingly, the eruption of Vesuvius parallels a much earlier story that Jews and Christians knew all too well: Sodom and Gomorrah, biblical sister cities whose inhabitants were notorious for their sexual deviations. The book of Genesis records that as punishment for their sins, Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed by fire and brimstone. Incredibly, there's a graffiti in Pompeii that compares Pompeii to Sodom and Gomorrah.
Today been made into a kind of modern guardhouse. But in the first century, this was somebody's home, and maybe the day of the eruption, or even the day before the volcanic eruption, somebody hastily scrawled on the wall in charcoal the chilling words, Sodom and Gomorrah.
I mean, somebody literally is writing this while the ash is falling down.
Possibly, yeah. It's not there anymore. It was on one of these walls. It's now modern plaster.
Yeah.
And it's been taken off to some museum.
What do you make of this charcoal inscription showing up here?
This has to be a Jew or a Christian who's thinking, why is the volcano erupting? Because this is Sodom and Gomorrah, and God is punishing this place. It's amazing.
I can just imagine a slave from the Holy Land cringing in a corner. There's nowhere to run, and ash is raining down. He or she would have seen the glory of the temple in Jerusalem and its destruction. Then in Pompeii, as a slave, they would have witnessed and maybe even experienced violence and orgies. Now, as Vesuvian ash was coming down, I can imagine the slave dipping into it and writing the epitaph of Pompeii, Sodom and Gomorrah. But aren't we imposing our view how they would have interpreted it? What do we have that says Christians and Romans interpreted the eruption of the Vesuvius as the divine wrath of God?
In the last book of the New Testament, the book of Revelation, if you read that, it has to be a description of the destruction of Pompeii. Now,
Wait a minute. You tell me that
Pompeii is mentioned in the New Testament, not by name. What the text says is Babylon is going to fall. Babylon means Rome. So it's everything from the city of Rome, the culture of Rome, but the date of that text is from the time of the Emperor Titus, and it's around the year 79 this text is written. And it talks about the city will be destroyed in 1 hour. The smoke of its burning will be seen in the harbor, and mentions fornication and immorality. Allegorically, this is Sodom and Gomorrah.
what you're suggesting is that hiding in plain sight in the New Testament itself, the interpretation was that this is divine retribution.
They saw the burning of Pompeii as the beginning of the end. As Rome is headed down, how do we know? Because God burned it in a single day, like Sodom and Gomorrah. And that's what happened, right where we're standing.
Less than 2 years after the eruption, the Emperor Titus died. A few Romans converted to Judaism, but a more sizable group converted to the new, more accessible Jewish sect already being called Christianity. It was this group that laid the foundation for the whole empire to become Christian less than 250 years after the eruption, and for Christianity to become, to this day, the most populous religion in the world. And all this was accomplished with a little help from a volcano called Vesuvius.